The Economics of Fallen Empires. The debt trap script imagined toppling a global superpower without launching a single missile, deploying a solitary soldier, or establishing a foreign base. You don't need a massive navy or a terrifying air force to bring a giant to its knees. All you really need is a loan agreement and a little bit of time. That is because the silent math of compound interest is a far more lethal instrument of war than any gunpowder ever conceived. Back in the 1800s, the combined might of the British and French empires managed to dismantle the Ottoman Empire, one of history, its most formidable civilizations, using nothing but the weight of credit. They didn't have to storm the gates of Istanbul or lay siege to the Sultan's inner sanctum. They simply provided capital on terms that were mathematically impossible to satisfy, then stepped back and let the ledgers do what 5 centuries of physical combat could never achieve. They liquidated a world power through bookkeeping. Understanding this historical heist is vital right now in February 2026. Here at the Economics of Fallen Empires, we track these cycles because the same predatory debt mechanics that erased the Brio Ottomans are currently being unleashed on developing states across the globe. From the heart of Africa to the coastlines of Asia, the trap is being set once more. And most chillingly, this United States is currently retracing the exact same footsteps toward the edge of the cliff. Over the next 25 minutes, I'm going to deconstruct the specific architectural plan of how debt colonizes a nation. We'll now look at how this was refined in the 19th century, how it is being weaponized today, and why the current trajectory suggests America has less than a decade before our creditors come to collect the keys to the house. Consider a story that should genuinely rattle you as it serves as a trailer for the future of the West. The scene is 1881 in the city of Istanbul. A delegation of European financiers enters the palace of the Sultan. These were generals with medals. They were accountants with briefcases filled with balance sheets, proving exactly how deep the Ottoman hole had been dug. They handed the Sultan a contract that effectively terminated 6 centuries of independent rule. This document birthed the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, or the OPDE. This wasn't a local government office. It was a private foreign firm, run by bankers from London, Paris, Berlin, and Rome. This corporation was granted a power that should be impossible: the legal authority to bypass the government and tax Ottoman citizens directly to pay off foreign debts. The revenue from salt, silk, tobacco, and even the fishing industry was signed over to foreign hands. The OPDE established its own shadow government employing over 5,000 armed tax collectors who didn't answer to the Sultan. They answered to boards of directors in Europe. For over 30 years, this foreign entity siphoned off 1/3 of every cent generated by the Ottoman economy. Imagine that 33% of a nation's entire economic output was diverted to foreign bank accounts before the government could even touch it. The Sultan, supposedly the leader of millions, became a ghost in his own palace. He had the title, but no treasury. He couldn't build a road, upgrade his military, or fund a school, because his revenue was being harvested at the source. This is the reality of debt colonization. The borders remain, the flag still waves, but the soul of the country is owned by someone else. At the Economics of Fallen Empires, we've identified a specific 5-stage blueprint that governs this process. It isn't an accident. It's a refined financial weapon that follows the same rhythm every single time. The 5 phases of national foreclosure. Phase 1. The crisis hook. You cannot ensnare a stable, thriving nation in a debt trap because they don't need your money. You have to wait for a moment of extreme vulnerability, a war, a pandemic, or a market crash. For the Ottomans, it was the Crimean War in 1853. Facing a Russian invasion, they were desperate for funds. Britain and France showed up not just with troops, but with checkbooks. In 1854, the Sultan took the first hit of foreign credit. It was framed as an alliance between friends, but the fine print was ruthless. The loan had a 20% issue fee, meaning for every 100 gold coins the Sultan borrowed, he only received 80, yet he had to pay interest on the full 100. It was predatory lending on a geopolitical scale, But the immediate crisis was solved, and the Sultan learned a lethal lesson. You can buy your way out of any problem today if you're willing to sell your tomorrow. Phase 2. The addiction cycle. Once a nation sees how easy it is to borrow, the spending becomes a drug. The Ottoman leadership looked at the glittering capitals of the West and felt a deep sense of inadequacy. To prove they were still a relevant world power, they began borrowing for prestige vanity projects. They built the Dolmabahce Palace, a sprawling monument of marble and gold leaf that cost a staggering 25% of the empire's total annual tax revenue. It featured 14 tons of gold and the world's largest crystal chandelier, all funded by foreign debt. They also bought a massive navy they couldn't afford to maintain. These ships eventually sat rotting in the harbor because there was no money left for coal. They were literally floating debt. Phase 3. The Ponzi spiral. By the 1860s, the Ottomans weren't borrowing to build. They were borrowing to pay the interest on previous loans. They were digging a new hole just to fill an old one. By 1870, 50% of all government tax revenue was going straight to interest payments. The state was being hollowed out. To keep the lights on, they turned to local high-interest lenders, paying 20% just to survive another month. It was fiscal suicide in slow motion. Phase 4. The default. In 1873, a global financial depression hit. The European banks stopped lending, and the music stopped. Simultaneously, a brutal drought destroyed the Ottoman harvest, and tax revenue evaporated. On October 6, 1875, the government officially admitted it was bankrupt. The international reaction was pure rage. Middle class. European investors saw their savings vanish, and the friendship of Britain and France turned into cold hostility. Sensing blood in the water, Russia attacked, crushing the bankrupt and undersupplied Ottoman army. The empire was left broken, friendless, and drowning in more debt than the entire value of its economy. Phase 5. The foreclosure. Rather than the messy business of a military occupation, the creditors chose soft conquest. They created the Opde I mentioned earlier. They didn't need to govern the people. They just needed to own the cash flow. This continued for decades, even through the birth of the modern Turkish Republic in 1923. The new nation was forced to inherit the debts of the old empire. The final payment on those 1850s loans wasn't made until May of 1954. It took 100 years and 4 generations of citizens to pay for the vanity of leaders who had been dead for a century. This isn't just a history lesson, it is a mirror. Today, we see the Belt and Road Initiative using this exact playbook across the developing world. Sri Lanka couldn't pay its debts to China, so it handed over a strategic port on a 99-year lease. Djibouti is now sitting at an 88% debt-to-GDP ratio, and conveniently, China now has a military base there. Zambia and Pakistan are currently navigating the same shark-infested waters. But the most alarming part is that the United States is currently in the middle of Phase 3. Our national debt is screaming past $38 trillion. We are spending over $1 trillion a year just on interest. Roughly 20% of all federal revenue. We are borrowing new money every single day just to keep up with the interest on the old money. We are losing the ability to invest in our own future because our past is too expensive. If we hit Phase 4, the default window, it won't look like an invasion. It will look like a restructuring. It will look like foreign creditors demanding stakes in our energy grids, our ports, or our land in exchange for debt forgiveness. It will be the end of American sovereignty while the flag still flies. We have the most powerful military in history, but as the Ottomans found out, you can't pay a soldier with an IOU. When the money dies, the power follows. We are currently on a timeline that suggests a major reckoning between 2027 and 2030. If we don't change course, we are looking at a foreclosure of the American dream. So what is the play? You have to realize that national insolvency requires personal solvency. If you don't own your debt owns you. Shed your liabilities, move into tangible assets that can't be printed into oblivion. and develop skills that hold value regardless of who is running the central bank. The math of debt is an unforgiving law of nature. The Ottomans took a century to learn that we might only have 10 years. If this breakdown of the debt trap opened your eyes, you need to subscribe to the Economics of Fallen Empires immediately. My next deep dive will cover the specific assets and survival strategies used by those who thrived during previous sovereign debt collapses. You won't want to miss it. The trap has already been set. The only question is if you'll see it before it snaps shut.